Hi everyone, and welcome to our first ever Global Dyslexia Group podcast. So you may be wondering what on earth we're going to be doing on here. Well, we're going to be doing a whole series on various different things. So some of it will be funny stories of things that we've encountered or experienced along the way. Others will be more biographical stories, and others will be real support networks of things that you can utilize and do on your dyslexic journey. Now, this podcast is all about supporting people with dyslexia and helping those around them to understand dyslexia better and how they can support their loved ones. As a global dyslexia group, we work with schools to help them be more inclusive and get rid of the stereotyping and the stigma that surrounds dyslexia. And we also go into workplaces and make them become fully inclusive so they can employ people with dyslexia and other neurodiverse issues and make sure that they're really giving their employees the best that they can. So today's first episode would be unfair if we didn't give you some of our history and our background. And this is to do with our co-founder, Darren Clark. So Darren is the co-founder alongside myself, but he is the dyslexic one within the partnership, aren't you, Darren?
Yes.
And I am the one who has had to learn very much about dyslexia quite quickly so that I can support him and understand it better. So today's episode, Darren's going to talk you through his own personal story, and we really hope it helps and resonates with some people and gets people to understand that it doesn't matter what the barrier, you can achieve and succeed. And of course, please do get in touch with us if you really would like any further information on how we can best support you on your dyslexia journey. Okay, so Darren.
Yes, hello.
It's like we've not known each other. Okay, would you like to tell us a little bit more about your childhood and understanding your own dyslexia?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I'm the young age of 43 now, and I didn't know I had dyslexia until the age of 36.
Wow.
So I was diagnosed very, very late. And so which meant that my childhood and early work career, I guess, was very difficult with unknown dyslexia. So I think growing up where I grew up in kind of a large council estate. It was quite a rough council estate, so there was lots of, there's lots of gangs, there's lots of crime, there's lots of things that were going on to kind of easily take you down one path, and which could really kind of prevent future jobs, I guess. And I always was someone who was quite creative, and I always thought to myself I didn't really want to kind of get into gangs and get into this side of it, but there was always this troubled side of it. We got broken into 11 times, car stolen on Christmas Day, and don't worry, there's not a GoFundMe page at the end of this. But what I want to show, I don't know if it's just the way that I see things with dyslexia, it's just that I tend to think differently. I tend to think, positive in the sense of, yes, we were broken into 11 times, but at least we weren't broken in 12 times. So it gives you a little bit of an idea. I came from a very loving family. I absolutely adored my mum and dad and my two brothers. So that wasn't that side of it. The side was the fact that the little 2-bedroom council flat that we grew up in was quite small and quite contained. And if anyone with dyslexia, for me, and I'm sure we'll cover this on many episodes, it's not just a visual thing. It's not just reading and writing. It's a lot of it's down to mannerisms and the way that we act as well. So I tend to move around quite a lot. Now, dyslexia for me, school was very, very tricky, very difficult. Primary school I loved. Secondary school was very, very difficult, being that I wasn't really allowed to sit in any of the main classes. So I was allowed to go into art and drama and PE, but anything like humanities, science, maths, science, these kind of lessons.
Academic.
Yes, I wasn't allowed to attend, purely because every time they gave me a test, I would either not be able to read it properly, not be able to answer the question. So what they would do is they would put me, when they would do the register and everyone else was going off to maths or science lessons, they would put me in this thing called the unit.
Okay, so just before sort of when you were moved into the unit, how did that make you feel that you were excluded from going to these more academic lessons? How did that make you feel sort of mentally? Did that have any repercussions for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was really tough. I mean, I always remember the first day going into school and going into the assembly, and you're a kind of, in primary school, you're a kind of a big fish in a small pond, and then when you go into secondary school, you feel so tiny. And I always remember going into the assembly, and then they would call you out into kind of groups, and I always just wanted to be with my friends that had come from the primary school into the secondary school. And I remember we were put into this science class, and we were given a test to do. So prior to this, we were given tests anyway, and then we were given these tests, and then the teacher came back in and then started to tell each student what class they were going to be going into, what reception class they were going to, what lessons they were going to do. And I just remember from the very first day being isolated away from my friends that I came to school with, and seemed to just sort of be put into a classroom with children that, and I hate the terminology problem children, but it was just a case of people that it felt like they didn't really know what to do with.
So I guess it's like the system we have where children are setted, aren't they? So they'll take what we have is SATs and CATs, and then they stream you into levels based on your academic achievement, I guess.
Yes, it was purely that.
And because of your dyslexia, you had problems with sort of getting down on paper what the answers were, and therefore you were streamed into lower sets with children they believed had a lower academic ability than what perhaps they did have.
Absolutely.
Okay, so, and that obviously was the setting for most of your secondary life. Do you have to tell us a bit more about what the unit was exactly?
So the unit isn't this elite police force, as American police forces you might think it is. It's basically, the best way to describe it is a rundown porter cabin, which in the summer is like a scalding greenhouse, and in the winter it's just the most coldest place on earth. And and it's just basically this literally just put in the middle of the field, and it's a place where they send children to sort of sit there, and then you get a supervisor to come in, and like a supervised teacher to kind of sit in there. There's not really any activities to do. There's a few colouring in books, but really mostly it was just people just sort of messing around for the hours upon end, and then the bell would go, and then you'd be released. So
I guess you were considered a problem child, really. You were considered somebody who didn't have the ability to learn, and therefore, it was more of an attention situation than it was academic.
Yes. I mean, they did try and take me out of the unit from time to time and sit me into a lesson, but the pressure was so intense that they would literally I would sit in there not really understanding what the lesson was, what was going on, and then the teacher would then review how I got on, and then it was a case of, well, actually, no, he's not paying attention. Now, I wasn't a trouble child, as in I wasn't, disruptive in any way. I was one of these people that just either sat back and didn't say anything, or just continuously put my hand up in certain lessons, and it just, nothing I was taking in was staying there. And I used to go home from school with massive migraines and headaches, where my brain was processing it at a phenomenal speed to try and catch up and try and deal with this.
So how did that make you feel in school then?
I mean, school's tough enough as it is. You have to, you're fitting in with your peer groups, and you're trying to, be cool and and everything else. But it made me feel like the confidence was just knocked out of me. Okay. It was really, to a point where, you still had, you had your friends, but they knew that when a certain lesson comes, you'd be taken out and put in the special class, as it was probably named.
So were you bullied in any way then at school?
Yeah, in school I was, quite heavily bullied. And, bullying happens all the time, and it's horrendous, because the long-term acts it carries out on someone is horrendous. But I think because I was so different in the sense that I probably didn't fit into that category of what everyone else does, and you're the boy that goes to the unit. So yeah, there was a lot of bullying, really bad.
So you were bullied, you felt, I suppose, stereotyped in that kind of awful stupid label, that you weren't academically bright, that you didn't have an awful lot, I suppose, in the way of education going for you. And so school life was really, really difficult for you.
Yeah.
And then for some children, what we have now is a great support network, is that when they go home, that's kind of their safety net. And I know you mentioned you've got absolutely incredible family, but actually things at home were difficult as well, weren't they?
Yes, they were. I mean, my late father gave up work at the age when I was about. I always remember my childhood up until about 10 or 11 being something like out of the Goonies. You know, we would ride on bikes and climb trees and build dens and everything else. And then from the age of about 12 years old, I think it was, I always remember my dad, who I love to pieces. He felt quite ill with depression, and he subsequently had to give up work. And back then, the way that the system worked was, it wasn't, even though my mum was a manager at one of the retail outlets, it didn't, we couldn't financially afford for my mum to work and my dad to be off. So my mum then gave up work and then became my dad's carer. And I think that was it, you know, having two parents at home, and my dad was quite poorly, was, it was tough. You know, we had that element to it. And then there was, like I said, there was a lot of bullying in the actual area that I was growing up in. So I almost had separate bullies, and again, obviously the crime element as well. So there wasn't really a sanctuary as such. As much as my parents put that in place, and they were, you know, absolutely phenomenal and amazing, there's only so much they could have done.
Absolutely. So school was difficult. The situation you were surrounded with at home was difficult. What did that do to your mental health then?
I think it just made me feel really like go inward, and I almost, you know, my imagination is wild, and it's probably why I always kind of create stuff and do stuff and always think of you know, amazing things to do. But I think growing up in that scenario, I think I went into kind of defense mode, and I didn't really talk about the bullying. I didn't really talk about what was going on and stuff. So I think it really did. I think now I can really reflect on how bad my mental health was around that period of time. But at the time, I think it felt like a bit like survival, really. And just like the norm, you know, it is what it is. It wasn't, but it did play absolute havoc.
So were you medicating? Were you on antidepressants or anything like that?
So at the age of 17, you know, there was quite a few elements of, you know, the bullying. There's quite elements of the crime, and I think it got, my body took a toll at the age of about 17. And I just remember having kind of I don't know if it was shingles or something, literally from the bottom of my toe all the way up to my head, where I was just so stressed and so you know, feeling awful, and the depression, the anxiety was all kicking in. And I did go to the doctors. I went to the doctors once, and they immediately put me on these really, really heavy, strong antidepressants. And then at the time, my dad was on these antidepressants, which were the same ones. And I think this is where your mindset, when you're feeling depressed and you've got anxiety and you're not, you know, not thinking straight, you don't do rational things. And what I did is I literally would kind of just take my dad's, because my dad was exempt, I think, or he paid for them or something else like this. I would just sneak out and take those antidepressants instead of going back to the doctors and then paying the 5-6 quid or something. I just thought in my head, well, if I can get them for free, I'll just have them. And subsequently, I was on them for nearly 6.5 years.
So you were self-medicating, in effect, without any proper supervision of these things to try and really kind of get yourself through.
Yeah, and they were really, I mean, I don't know what they're like now, but they were really, really strong in the sense that they would just make me so tired and lethargic. And again, you know, these sort of things, you should be going to the doctors and getting checked out. But I just remember a period of my life where they were so, they were almost, I don't know, like tranquilizers, I guess. Yeah. And all I was doing was trying to suppress and numb all the stuff that had happened.
So just going quickly back to school, obviously you'd lived this, you know, this life of going through school where you were secluded really and bullied and isolated. And when it came to exams, am I right in saying that you left without a single grade?
Yes. I mean, all I wanted to do really was just be normal. And you use that word, what is normal? But I just wanted to I didn't want to be, I always thought I was different. I always thought I was special, but I didn't want to be different and special. I just wanted to fit in. And I always remember when I was hearing about the exams were coming, the end of school exams. And I was so excited because I thought I'd get out of the unit into a classroom and sit the exams. And I always remember going into school, quite excited that day and looking on the board and trying to read all the different names of what classroom you have to go in for what different exam. And I always remember my teacher coming up to me and tapping me on the shoulder and almost mocking in a way, saying, Clark, your name's not on there. We're not putting you through any exams. It'd be a waste of paper. And that was it. That was there wasn't any exams for me. I was the thing that they did, which I thought was really quite harsh looking back on it, is that instead of sitting you in the unit, they sat you in this classroom, which was adjacent to where everyone was having the exam in the hall, because they didn't have as many teachers, because all the teachers were doing the exams and stuff. So they had to keep an eye on us and keep an eye on the people with the exams. But the trouble is, it was a glass window, so everyone everyone that was taking the exams could see that I was just kind of sat in there with a colouring in book, as opposed to doing the exam. And when the bell would go, we'd all get up and go out into the playground. So that happened for the whole duration. I mean, I don't know how long exams lasted, a week or a couple of weeks?
Yeah, a good couple of weeks.
So yeah, that was my couple of weeks, really. And then when school came, we literally were told, that's the end of school and you have to go out and get a job.
Bless you, crikey. So we're at the point now where we've left school. We've got no grades or qualifications at all. We're self-medicating on antidepressants. And really, I suppose your inner vocabulary at this point would have been quite low. Your self-esteem would have been very low. And now you're having to go out into the big wide world and start forging a path for yourself. So if you can just tell us briefly about how you sort of secured your first job and what that meant to you.
Yeah. So I've always, even though that's everything that was going on, I've always had this kind of entrepreneurial spark about me. So I've always done, lots of things on the side, bought and sold things and created different things as an entrepreneurial way. But one of my biggest skills, I thought, was kind of people. And I knew if I could talk to someone, I could convince them to get a job. But I didn't know how to apply for a job, and I couldn't really write at that stage very, very well. So I literally I spoke to my parents, and they said, well, you're going to have to go and ask for people. So I got on my BMX and I literally cycled for miles all around the area, getting application forms. They were all on paper back in those days, and get my mum to help me fill out all these different application forms. And I think I got rejected by about 17. I even applied for a funeral parlor. I applied for a bank. I applied for, big companies, and then all little companies as well. And the one thing that I found, and this is where I think with dyslexia, we look at things and we try and problem solve or look at different ways of doing it. When I was putting the application form each time, I noticed the top right-hand side of the box where you would put your exams in. So you would put Maths C or English A or something. And that box was left empty every single time because there wasn't anything to put in there. So I subsequently, just before I went into the Sainsbury's the store to hand my application form in, I took it out of my backpack, and I sat down and I wrote in. I thought to myself, well, if I did get grades, what would I have got? And I remember writing in, didn't want to give myself too many good grades, and wrote in, humanities. Trouble is, my mum had written it out really nice in one coloured pen, and I'd written that out in a different coloured pen. It looked like a spider had crawled across the page, but they didn't do any checks. And subsequently, I got my first job in Sainsbury's, which was 12 hours a week, pushing trolleys.
Fantastic. So, and that starts really the next chapter, the next episode, which is an entrepreneurial journey, where you'll tell everybody about how you really went from pushing trolleys for 12 hours a week up to a regional director for Tesco, and then how we built our companies and going forward. But just to kind of end this podcast, really, I think for anybody listening who maybe have got children that might be showing signs of dyslexia, it would be interesting to know when you were at school, really, kind of the things that showed up for you, whether that was on the page or whether that was behaviorally, just so it can maybe help somebody else out there in a similar situation.
Yeah, fantastic I would definitely urge anyone to get in touch. We'd love to hear some people's views on this.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, sorry, I've made myself clear. When you were at school, what was it that you found particularly difficult? Was it the reading? What did you see? How was your behaviour?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my behaviour, I guess, when I first went into the school was very, quite confident, and I suppose over the time it felt like it got beaten out of me, literally, purely because the confidence would go because you would probably be labelled as not very smart or not intelligent or not be able to be inclusive of that. But it was I suppose, I use laughter a lot and fun to try and disguise a lot of to disguise things.
It's like the class clown, I suppose.
Yeah, I was always kind of the class clown, because I thought if someone liked my humour, then they wouldn't worry about what I can deliver, academically.
And what about, putting your hand up to read off the board, or reading part of a book in an English? Is that something that you would actively shy away from?
Absolutely. The probably most scariest thing ever was, it was almost like walking the plank or something, because not that I've done that, but you that moment when you're all sat in class and then the teacher's going around asking you to read the next chapter of the book, or to come up to write something on the board. That's been asked a couple of times, and it is the most scariest thing ever, because once you get up there, you either the letters are moving around or you can't write it, and then you've got the laughing behind you, and it's just a really bizarre, horrible moment.
So I guess for you, it was avoidance tactics so that you wouldn't have to raise your hand or read aloud in class. It was the kind of humour as a facade, really, to try and get by. Anything
to distract.
Yeah.
It was almost like a politician's answer, I guess, when I'm not saying that politicians don't answer questions, but when you ask a question, I would go all the way around the houses, and to a point where they would come and be bamboozled and thinking, did he answer it? Didn't he answer it? Where am I? So it was always a distraction.
And what about concentration levels? Was that an issue for you?
Hugely. Yeah. Concentration in general is it's very difficult. If you think of the dyslexic way, the fact that each dyslexic person is different to everyone else. There's so many. It's on such a huge scale. So my dyslexia would be different to the person next to me's dyslexia, so to speak. We may have similarities in that, and if you think about it from a reading term where we all see the same, it's just the way that we decode. The concentration, the memory side of it, everything is just really, it's almost kind of quite muddled up.
Yeah.
So it does become quite hard, and simple tasks. Like if I had to get ready and pack, for the next day, that would be catastrophic for me, because I would then be thinking about 10, 15 different things and probably not achieve anything. Mm-hmm. So it's like I said, it's not just reading, it's concentration is massive.
Absolutely. Okay, well, thank you ever so much for sharing that with us. I hope people will find that helpful. So that was Darren's that's the part, the sort of school and working up to that and getting your first job. Our next episode will really delve into kind of that job and then the entrepreneurial journey. But again, it would be great to get any feedback or any questions, and we do aim to support as many people as we possibly can. So please do get in touch with us, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, guys, and we'll see you very, very soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.